I need that.
Okay, okey doke. So I think our main thing today is to discuss anything that came out of the staff focus groups that we think is sort of key to touch on. And then hopefully everyone had a chance to look through the document that Mike sent through ChatGPT, which seems to me to be a good and interesting summary, and pinpoint the things that we want to highlight in the plan. So, as far as the staff focus groups, were there things in particular that stood out to you?
I mean, there's stuff that I kind of expected, which was like the community hub stuff, like that was just a recurring theme, it seemed like across almost all the groups. Also like access and equity also, so it seems like there's a lot of parallels between the, internal and external groups, which is good. So it seems like we're not like totally disjointed, which is good to see, like.
So I like that makerspace came up a few times.
Yes.
I'm kind of on the record as not liking to have a room dedicated to a single purpose, but I feel like that came up in other areas of the public.
It did. Mhm.
Like just people like analog, they want to make stuff. Have a product for the things they learn and a space to do it.
Anything else that we can draw out of the staff group? If not, we can switch focus to kind of looking at them both together. That works for everybody. So, staff versus community comparative analysis is what that one document is titled, that Mike plugged through.
It's a very straightforward title.
So oh, okay. So general thoughts on that document?
Thank you for doing it, Mike. I was like,
Yeah.
I wonder if I should plug it into ChatGPT, and then it came through and I was like, great.
So since like the staff stuff is definitely more focused towards like internal things, like
Yeah.
that, are we just gonna have maybe a separate section in long range planning for like internal goals versus external, like community goals? Because otherwise it seems like it's gonna get not incorporated.
So that's a good question for us. Typically a long-range plan is an externally focused
Right.
document, like it's intended for the public to see what our plans and goals are for the future. That said, I don't think it could address internal things. If we're not going to include those things in the plan, then I think we have to have some sort of plan for how they are addressed outside of the long-range plan, so that it doesn't seem as though we're disregarding like all the input that came from the staff.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Your
Did
thoughts
we
on it?
say, I thought when we were talking, and I did look to say that was, it was gonna be a broad, like, GPL would be a place people would want to work,
Mhm.
and there would be it would foster that kind of a workplace where people would want to come and offer, benefits, whatever, in a as general as a term as you could make it. I thought that was something we had talked about, like Christina may have mentioned, was just to include that as part of the plan in just
Yeah, because I think it ties together. If you attract top talent, then
yes.
you get better programming, you get better service, you get blah, blah, blah. But I mean, just, there are some specific things here that is really just specific to staff interests. But I also, like Corey said, don't want to just disregard it because otherwise what was the point?
Right.
So I think we can take pieces that I think build into the things that we saw as goals from the community and how the staff ties into those things, and then also like maybe separately make sure this stuff doesn't just like go into the wind.
I agree, and I think, I don't think we've talked a whole lot about the structure of how we're gonna do our long range plans. I looked at a bunch from some other libraries, and then I also was trying to look at some like best practices things. And usually it seems like it's kind of like a 3-tiered thing where you have your, I don't know what you call them, topics or whatever, where you maybe have
Like
like
goals.
3 to 5 like big kind of topic areas, and then each of those is broken down into like several objectives, maybe 2 to 4 objectives or some number of, and then those have like action steps underneath the objectives, and so you have this kind of, but it seems like if we have, 3 to 5 big areas, there could be one of those areas that's kind of specifically focused kind of more internally, I don't know the level of detail, some things are kind of, not the kind of detail that needs to be elevated in a long range plan, but there could be, I think there's a level of things that, I think people, members of the general community can see the value, even if it's not directly public facing, they can see the value in having, a workplace that also, that, is able to, like, we were just saying, attract and retain, quality, employees and in order to do the services. So I don't think there's anything wrong with at least having a piece of this kind of a little more internally directed.
I think that's, it would be good if there's some hint in the long range plan is that it's not a cornucopia of stuff that is always there, that there is a cost benefit behind it. Some of this stuff and how we say that these are the constraints that we're working within, because we're working with this, but pretty strict budget constraints at this point in terms of being able to move some of these things forward.
Yeah, and I think we should draw the line directly in the document because it is a public facing document. So the line needs to be like really well drawn to be like, by being an employer of choice, this is how it benefits the community. This is how it leads to better library service, so that the staff feel heard, but also when the public looks at it, they're like, oh, this is how it benefits the community. So, yeah, I mean, like to your point, Mike, I mean, we just need to like really
Yep.
hit it with a hammer.
Yep.
So perhaps rather than going through this, I know that when I sent out an email, I said to highlight a few things that stand out to you as sort of keys that we could put up there. I am in agreement on sort of Mike's thought process on organizing, and I think some of the language that you talked about how, the community resources, that we'll get into more as we actually write it and decide on those. But if we are looking at this and we're thinking our top tier of goals or objectives, however you want to frame it, is 3 to 5 things. What should those 3 to 5 things be? What stood out and what other gut reactions do you have? Christina, I saw you have highlights, so I know you're ready to go.
Hot pink. It might be simplistic to pick our things based on how AI kind of categorized these things, but I think it picked up well on some common themes. So in the first one, I have basically the first 3 circled as kind of like, if I were to pick out of the 5, but there are things in all of them that I think are important that could be slid in. So like the first one, I've got geographically dispersed community, cross-generational meeting point, a place to combat loneliness, relationships, build relationships and human connection. So I feel like that was common between both the staff and the public groups. So I feel pretty strongly about like the future of the library being like having an eye on that. I also have highlighted in number 2. I mean, it's funny because the things I highlighted, I believe we should be a place for trustworthy information, but I highlighted early literacy programming and desire for intellectually rigorous adult programming, and then drew an arrow to the adult programming concerns. And it's hard for me to not have circled 3 as the head of adult services on like, what can our public is letting us know kind of like what they want and where we should go with that. So I highlighted and circled things from there. Deeper humanities level offering, civic dialogue, a fear of loss of adult and teen engagement, some more dates and times for our offerings, and then the intellectually rigorous goes into that. From the back, it's hard not to also pick access and equity, but like our website could use an update. I agree there. We're working on some shelving concerns. Yeah, I don't know. I feel most strongly about, I guess, the first one.
Okay, the community hub piece. Okay.
And I think, part of it might depend on how kind of granular or broad, these categories, like the high level, the top.
So I think
level
we want
are.
the top level to be relatively broad.
Some of these, this, the adult programming concerns, but also some of the stuff that's under this commitment to literacy, well, at least some of it, not all of it, where could kind of broadly just fall under the bucket of the, programs and services in general. And just, I don't know how we want to exactly phrase it, but if we had one goal that was just basically, enhance the, offerings of, programs and services, and then underneath that have some, breakdowns and something focused on adult, programming, something else focused on, literacy or other, I don't know, whatever, those could kind of fit on one category potentially. I don't know what all our categories are gonna be.
Are there other things that stood out to you since you're talking now?
I think that definitely, I agree that the, this top point on here about the, community hub thing, that was just something that came up over and over again. So I think that, should be, just, I don't know, again, I don't know how we want to word it, but something about, just, again, trying to really, lean into that role, enhance, the library as a community hub and meeting point or whatever, a center of the community in some way or whatever, something like that. I think that definitely should be one of our big, big picture topics.
Who's up next? Oh, go ahead.
I think the two topics, the third one maybe has more to do with, the infrastructure or technological, whatever it is that you're gonna need to be able to move these two top topics along, more the substance of what you need to have in a library to be able to do those types of things. If we're gonna expand these into these new areas, then we're gonna create a system of some kind. Those would be sort of things that sort of tie into. You're not gonna get there unless you have these things, and these are the big high level sort of infrastructure things that you need to have.
The structure piece of it. Anything else that jumped out, Al? Or that's kind of just where you're,
No,
Oh.
okay.
okay.
Pretty much the same, the cross-generational meeting point stood out, intellectually rigorous adult programming, but I included children's in that too, because early literacy is mentioned. I think, we're seeing, it's, the perception that adult programming declined post-pandemic, yeah, I think that happened everywhere, so there was that. The strategic clarity being essential to balance ambition with capacity. I know it's under the tensions, but I think it's just that's, I don't know how, if it needs to be in there, but somehow that I think has to be reconciled though, to be able to pull all of it off in that term. And one point on number 4, the access and equity, I'm not really sure where some of this information came from because it's not Gilderland. We don't have my cards. Our fees and our circulation and fee policies, we don't have fees, and we're pretty, you get 28 days. On day 26, your book renews if it can be renewed for another 28 days, 2 more times. So you can essentially almost have a book for 4 months in this library before you're charged for it.
Well, that's the perils of an AI summer.
That's why I said, that's why I was throwing that out. Like, so, and the study room privacy concerns, like, strict borrowing rules, I was like, where was that? And I'm pretty sure that was said in the meeting, it was written in the notes. So I'm like,
I think that also comes from some confusion, and that the goal of our community focus groups was not to correct people,
Oh, yeah,
and so I think that like some of that was.
that was actually staff. So that
Was
we were,
that
yeah,
staff?
that's a staff view. So I was like, I'm kind of, yeah, that kind of confused.
From talking to Chris, I think and again, this is the peril of AI. I think it was one staff member who brought it up and was very concerned about it. And they weren't saying, you have my card and it's bad. They were saying, if we do my card, it would not go well.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, yeah,
It was just
I don't.
because I was like, this doesn't really relate to us as a concern, because,
Yeah, I didn't compare it back against the notes from the.
but no, but they were there, so
Yeah.
it doesn't, it didn't
Pick
take it
something,
away, it
didn't
just,
Make it out of nowhere, but it might have elevated something that wasn't.
like AI was like, I can tell the feeling from
I'm
it.
feeling better about AI already.
Yeah, I'm not sure why ChatGPT was like, this is the thing to focus on.
Well, it was like I don't wanna paint a wooden snake.
Right.
That even gave us a diagram.
Yeah.
Even a snake. But that just kind of like threw me a little bit, because I thought, that's interesting if we think that way, because we don't have, or even our circulation and fee policies, because
Yeah,
I
and we
feel
can
like-
just cross that out. That's not even something we're taking into consideration
Yeah.
because we know it's inaccurate. And I mean, some of the feedback is always going to be inaccurate because it's based on perceptions that anyone has, so.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so sort of that cross-generational space, programs and acknowledging ambition with capacity, that's, okay? Alish, you wanna go?
Sure, so I'm just picking 3 things.
Just pick a few things that sort of like stood out that you would want to see as like broad goals.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I think the one thing, because it also came up in the session I was in, was that access and equity and like offering multiple of the same program because there's just access issues, because limited space and things like that. So I did really take that as a good takeaway. The community space, of course, I liked some of the comments that people called out where it's like there aren't a lot of accessible spaces or safe, quiet spaces for people to go. And I feel like the library is that to a lot of people. Even like the bus stop comment and the staff thing. I don't know how feasible that is, but I was like, oh, that's so smart. And yeah, maybe the commitment to literacy, and I think a subset of that media literacy. I think there's a lot of people now that have a hard time critically thinking, or they just take things at face value. And I think it's important to have like a very reliable place to get information from or help navigating that, because the stuff my kid brings to me and is like, did you know this? And I'm like, that's not a thing. So like that ties into some of the programming, because I think it's important to like combat some of the things that are kind of going wonky in the world, and I feel like the library is the place to do it. And then I agree.
Okay. Pete,
So my general feelings actually fell in line with ChatGPT, which is upsetting. So to me, number 1 was the most important one, with us being a community hub. I refer to it as Gilderlet's living room, but we're seeing the meeting room and the programming space just in constant demand. So that's the one that resonated with me. The second one I'd actually written down as like books ? Because that's the core of the library's mission, which I think a lot of our public focus groups, people were like, don't get away from books. But Alicia, what you're saying really resonated with me. It's like a reinterpretation of what does literacy mean. So I love that one. Access and equity came up a lot, because I think that one and number 1 both speak to the building, like the facility, the location. But number 4 gets into the outreach efforts, because we had seniors talking about they can't get to the library, they don't want to drive after dark. So, kind of can we bring the library to other people? The programming one didn't resonate with me as much, but I kind of take it as like the same way we're never not going to have books, we're never not going to have programming. But then number 5, the communications concern, I would replace that with whatever we're using for employer of choice. Like, we're going to be a good, healthy organization, and then that will benefit the community. So I would actually keep all 5 in some tweaking.
okay. I also agree. I'll share mine now too, but I agree with the community hub piece, like that seems to be sort of central and is very important for our community. I also had the same question, because nothing really got picked up about the collection as a whole, and I still do see that as an integral part of the library. I don't know if, because it hasn't risen up in all of this, how it should be included. But that's another piece. And then I I have like access and equity issues, but less about, for one, yeah, I don't think that the website is like screen readable. I don't think it meets like any ADA standards, especially as they're amping them up. So I would love to see some of that, but also hearing so much from the community about the difficulty of traveling in the community. And so like that sort of spurred my mind on to kind of that outreach portion of the discussions. So those are probably the ones that. But we have quite a bit of light, so this is positive. Then I would say we all come from different perspectives, but we all have quite some experience with the library here. So what didn't come up in this? What didn't rise to the top, but we still think needs some focus? I can start by saying to acknowledge and respond to this room over here.
Yeah.
Like, I think that needs to, it's not necessarily like rising up in this, though it does pop up plenty of other spots.
We also had the survey, you know.
And we had the survey results and I forgot to print that before, and that was big time in the survey results, right? So, I would like to see that. I don't know what area it's under, but like,
Community hub.
Yeah, somewhere in the
space.
space.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because, yeah, I would say that from what I remember when we talked about all the separate groups, and as much as a lot of us don't like the idea, I still think it's fine, is the cafe and whatever iteration that looks like, maybe not the original concept. A lot of like, especially the parents and stuff seem to bring that up. But even like a multi-purpose space, like where it doesn't necessarily have to be like a for-profit business. I know a couple times it was said like, could this be something with like BOCES or something like that, where it's technically a community service type thing that also happens to benefit the patrons and like fill two buckets. The other one I didn't see as much of was the like space, like the visuals of the space, because I know that had been like a huge focus for a while. It's like, how do we warm up the space, like make it a little more like cozy and whatever. I didn't see that come up as much, which I was kind of surprised about because that was
so
such a
that
huge-
would be something you would still sort of bring up as a higher.
Possibly, like, I think it's not something people might call out as like their main priority, but I think if we did that, they'd appreciate it. Like if.
Yeah, because they've appreciated everything so far.
Yeah,
And I wonder how much of it is skewed by we're in this building every day, you know, some of us, so we're looking at it every day. People who pop in here, the thing I hear most commonly is like, oh my God, this library is so beautiful, you know, so it's in the eye of the beholder.
The shelving changes though already. Someone stood at Cirque and they were like, I can see you, looking all the way down to the information desk. So those changes have already within the staff, and that will catch.
yeah.
What other things do we not see represented in here, but that could either be a top tier goal or feed into those?
I remember a lot of the groups, I think several, at least a couple of the groups asking for like a quiet space to do work or read. But that goes back into demand for space and there's so many things that we're trying to do. It's hard, but I think it came up a few times and the library is really busy during the day, during the week. So I think that's desired.
Yeah, what I heard and it's on some of the earlier focus groups that we did was the interest in having this as an educational hub. You know, classes and, movie screenings followed by book reviews, or followed by discussions, or, the continuing learning piece of this. It's not really that, it's sort of in the words. There are some places you want to read into it, but it's not specifically called out. But I think that was a big thing in the group that I said. So, to what extent, it's one thing to have books on the shelf and people who can direct you and people who can answer your questions, but to what extent are we going to go in the direction of actually having more learning as opposed to ad hoc, programs here and there that touch on this topic, that topic, but is there going to be more consistency around the thought of learning?
Other things that maybe we haven't discussed so far, or things you want to emphasize?
I mean, we touched on it before, but we didn't see anybody mention books, which I know that if we like took this very literally and we're like, well, nobody said books, then that people would lose their minds. So I mean, it's the thing that makes a library. So I think just making sure that's incorporated somewhere in literacy or somewhere. And I guess it does come up a little bit, maybe sideways from some of the staff focus where they were talking about don't do too much, don't expand too far away from our core purpose. So maybe that's,
Like on the mission drift and focus?
yeah, so it may be inferred from there, but you get in danger of making those inferences.
Well, on the audio visual material, books is another thing, a good half of our shelf space, it feels to me, is like fun, like Blockbuster.
Yeah.
Revisit it, and, that's sort of like an aging technology at this point in time. And, if this is a long-range plan, 3 to 5 years, it's, the upper, is our DVD still gonna be that much floor space?
Are you talking to the right person, Christina? What do you think?
Yeah.
They're hanging on.
I get the sense that, just looking at the monthly reports that we get, that the audio visual materials are still pretty high circulation.
They are, it's, we've looked at trying to reduce and, the numbers are still supporting use of them. Doesn't mean we can't like balance, but yeah, it's kind of surprising.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when you get into, when we talk about trustworthy information, when you stream things, when you don't have ownership of things anymore, they get changed, they get tweaked. And this pops up a lot with the AV material where it's like, oh, I want to see this movie the way it was the director intended. Well, the only place you may be able to see that's the library. So it's.
Not to mention, like, you can pay for a streaming I like it actually makes perfect sense to me because this has come up a lot lately where I'm like, oh, I want to go watch this movie. And I go to the 5 different streaming services I already paid for and they're like $3.99 to rent it. And I'm like, what is included then? Because I'm spending a ridiculous amount of money. So I'm gonna come here like
Like I was on Hulu, but then it
Yeah,
went off.
then it-
Now it's
yeah.
gone.
Like if I went to the dollar store, I could find this for $1, but I'm having to pay $4 for a movie that's 30 years old and wasn't even good anyway. Like I just wanted to be nostalgic. So I'm like, I get why people would come here and be like,
As an anecdote though,
$4.
when I was a clerk and we had voting, someone came in and got his library card and then proceeded, and I don't know where he is now within the collection. He started at A and was borrowing 7 movies a week,
Whoa.
if not more. And that was his purpose. He was like, I have a library card and you have videos, you have DVDs, and he started. I still see him coming in. He comes in with a little garbage. He comes in with a little plastic grocery bag. I still see him.
Yeah.
I don't know where, like I said, I don't know where he is in the collection at this point, but he was like, I'm starting at A.
Yeah,
I
I love that. But yeah.
What else to say
I
there?
mean, I haven't even owned a DVD player in like 15 years, so, but, and I wonder, and these are the kind of things that I like sort of think like peripherally in my head, but I don't know how much, obviously we're talking the big goals right now. I don't know how much into the weeds we want to get, because again, 5 years ago, we all probably would have said those DVD collection is going away because it's not gonna get usage.
I would have assumed.
And they're still here and still getting used. So I don't know how much into the weeds we want to get about making predictions, but maybe,
I think this is going back to the books, what Pete said, the books are obviously still kind of the core. The historical core of the library is still like the core piece of the library, and it's the floor space is, books, we provide books, that's what libraries do. But for purpose of the long range plan, it's how do we make that, something that's like an actionable, specific thing, just, keep having books is not really a plan, keep doing what we're doing, or, just keep providing books. It's kind of is there some specific things or some way we need to, some type of books or a focus or something, or a way that we're, I don't know, presenting the books to, for discoverability to patrons or other things about the collection of books, something specific that we could, make actionable and say, well, here's how we're gonna make the book collection, better in some way. to the patrons.
Rewrite the Dewey Decimal System.
You joke, but I've been reading some literature about how to
Oh, there you go,
decolonize
okay,
it.
there we go. Yeah, yes.
I need to run on my appointment, but is there a link for this? If not, I can just message you.
Don't
That's okay, that's okay.
think so.
catch up.
I have captured your thoughts.
Oh, yeah, sorry. When
No, it's all right.
scheduling moved around, I was like, oh no.
No, it's okay.
But
Guys. Thanks, Leash.
That, the discoverability really resonated with me, Christina. I think your team could run wild with that, like adding that as a strategic element. Like,
What's that? I'm sorry, say.
the discoverability of the collection and like as part of the commitment to
Browsability.
literacy and trustworthiness, like not just we have books, but how do we get it to the people?
What are like creative ways when you have patrons to kind of get in front of them things they may be interested in, right? I mean, you can do it with, just physical display and having, little pop, little special themed displays or things like that. But maybe there's more creative things we could do, either using the website or other technology or things that, like if you like this, you might like that kind of things,
The old reader's advisory.
or just other, there might be other very, creative things we could think of or ways we could kind of help to direct people or bring things to people's attention or whatever that's kind of not necessarily involves increasing the collection or changing the collection a certain way, but making it more accessible to people in the sense that they know something's here that they never would have thought to look for or wouldn't have known where to look for it or whatever. And now, we somehow are, creating a way to surface that to them. I don't know how to do it, but it's something to think about.
At the same point in time, one of the other things that came through was just the fun of browsing the stacks. And finding something on the spine and saying, I wonder what that's about, or that's always been an interest to me, but I just saw it there. So there's that dynamic too, that's what the books are, they're a browsing place. And, I don't know how you can improve on that dimension of it by doing what Mike's, suggesting here.
Yeah.
We do have a number of things around here that sort of speak to that. This shelf out here has got some things, the new books, and then there's the theme thing right across from the circulation desk, and in the kids' rooms there are things that are set up with that nature, but
There's things you can do in the stacks and, you need like the space and to do it, but, there's like all sorts of things you can read about, like browsability, marketability. What I was gonna say is, the goal, we don't have to necessarily predict what people will be checking out, like by the time the long range plan is done, but we could say something about like continuing to have a strong, agile, responsive collection would address like whatever direction we go in. So if we're responding to what the patrons are doing and how they're using it and what they want, then it's, whether it's books versus DVDs versus video games. If we use words like responsive, agile, flexible.
Active,
Yeah.
like active language.
the other thing that was, didn't really get picked up in this thing is the concept of the book sale that we have. That is like the coffee shop, for example.
Yeah.
It is up there and billing with, a certain, portion of our clientele.
Contingency.
Yeah.
And there are certain things that go with that. Is doing it is one thing, organizing, which I think we're making great strides in. But then space for it, space for storage and things of that nature. And there's a lot of infrastructure that goes behind that sort of, if we're gonna do that on a more consistent and regular basis, we're gonna need infrastructure in place to put that. And that's sort of in conflict with other infrastructure space needs that we have here that are.
Yeah, the building's not growing. I started sweating as soon as we started talking about, well, what if we turn, Norman's Skill into a different space? And I'm like, where the bookshelf's gonna go? So, yeah, no.
It is true, they being patrons, were asking for the book sale like a lot before we redid it again last year. So it was definitely on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah.
Came up a lot.
That might be why it didn't come up this time. They're like, yeah, you did it, check mark.
Yeah.
So I don't want us to necessarily like build goals that we have to shoehorn our thoughts into. But I think if we keep our top categories sort of broad enough, that almost everything that we're talking about will have a place to fit. So based on this discussion and me pumping my non-chat GPT mind, the things that I'm seeing is sort of like our overarching goals. Obviously, the community hub, that's something that almost everybody hit on, whatever we ultimately want to call it. And then see, I would say programming and collections are in there somehow. We need to think how we want to frame those. And I'm just using collections in the broad sense, but I think we can also mean electronic, like all that kind of stuff. And then the access and equity piece came up quite a bit. Are we comfortable like sort of thinking that that might be one of our big goals? Whether or not we're talking about actual like technology, physical space, but meeting the needs of our community. So.
And his thing about the outside the community, outside of the outreach.
Like that outreach piece, I think would definitely fit under that. And then, as Pete had mentioned, talking about this as us as an employer of choice. I think if we want to include that as a large goal, we need to think about what would actually fit under there. Or whether that would be an element of one of the other goals. So I don't know. You all probably have a better handle on that, like how that might fit in.
I would just say, the middle one, access,
Equity
equity and outreach.
and outreach.
Okay, those three things sort of like,
Yeah.
two of them are sort of in here, one of them's up there. I think, the employer of choice, is one thing, but then it's, a facility that suits the needs of the.
The facilities piece.
Yeah, so the way I wrote it, I wrote employer choice / strong community resource, because I think those two things, it's the two sides of the coin, right? If we're strong for our staff, we're strong for the community. And I think it talks about the resource itself has to be beneficial to the community.
So how are we viewing that as different than the community hub piece?
Could be the same.
Community hub is more the things that you're doing, I think. I think there's a distinction between the things that you're doing and then the facility and the people that are there to implement it.
To me, it might be, they might fit together, but to me, community hub was more things like the meeting rooms and
Yeah, that's what I was.
the education and like the discussions. Why are people coming here? And then strong resources, what's their experience like once they're here? So why are they coming in the door? What's it like when they're here? That's how I was.
I wasn't thinking of community hub in terms of the resources like that either. But I don't know. I don't know if I have the best grasp of it.
I'm not sure, I'm starting to think, I wonder if maybe community hub is not necessarily one of our top level goals, but it's more of a theme that runs through multiple different goals, and just, but I don't know because it kind of seems to encompass a bunch of different things, like, it's some of this stuff falls under programs, I don't know, programs is one of our, have the top level things, but, that's part of what Pete was just talking about there as part of what makes the community hub. Some of it is about the physical space and the use of this, the physical space. Maybe this all fits under community hub, but maybe it all, it goes under a couple other categories. There's different ways we can organize this, but I'm not sure.
No, I think that's a really well stated way. Community hub is the overall theme of
That's our vision.
fits and vision.
Yeah.
And then, you have programs and materials and things and all the things that people come to a library for, and then there is the way, the equity inclusion, and then the outreach and what do they get here, and then what's going to go out there, and then the facility that and the people who provided, are they adequate for what's gonna need to happen to them to achieve the vision here? Where do we have it? And then part of this is gonna be where we. For
Okay. How do we feel about sort of that, like, I kind of like the idea of weaving, like, I like to approach a long-range plan as like, or a strategic plan as like, here's our mission statement, here's our vision, and then that vision should be included, so this makes a lot of sense to me, but I don't want to take it in a direction that,
Like weaving in the theme of,
Yeah.
yeah, I like that.
like,
I
our
like that
vision
too.
is to be the community hub for Gilder, or the, however we want to say it, the third space, the living room, whatever, and then that gets woven sort of.
Yeah.
And then within each of our goals is kind of how these contribute to
Yeah.
making this more of a community hub.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah,
Goals support
Yeah.
the vision.
yeah.
Stupid.
Okay.
And we're being advanced on chat here.
Don't say that, I can hear you.
Yeah.
It'll be here in a minute and our brain.
Okay, so then if we're sort of thinking of that as our vision, our very top tier, and we're thinking of our goals next, then we have the programming piece, which we're gonna figure out how best to define this, but to make sure it includes these components, the collection piece, the access, equity, and outreach, the community, how are we dealing with the space? Are we saying community space? Are we saying library, like, to encompass these things like the warmth, the space, the meeting rooms, the things that we know need to be included?
I'm sad that Alicia left because I bet she would have had something good for this.
Maybe it's just something that's around the, you know, just the space. We could just, you know, say have a, you know, a physical, you know, physical space that's, you know, conducive to, you know, I don't know what. You know,
Yeah.
Something.
We're just gonna use space as a placeholder
Exactly.
right now.
Yeah.
I think space is fine because I was recalling some of the things that came up in the focus groups, warm, welcoming, and
Mhm.
space for learning. It, like, space is the
Yeah.
word there.
And then I still have, so that is 4. And I still have this lingering employer of choice / community resource. Does that go in one of these pre-existing categories of programming, equity, collection, space? Or is it its own?
I feel like it's its own thing.
Other thoughts?
So we just,
I can see it as its own, but I can also see it as, you know, these are the two things that make community hub possible, are the space and the people that run it. This is what's needed to pull off the long-term plan.
Sort of the human resources of it all. How is that?
Can't see it. I'm like, would it go anywhere else? And I don't know. So, what Bill said.
So this is sort of just a people.
Culture and environment, just. It's Google. It's Google. But that like was
I
one of
like
the
that.
first things that, and that kind of encompass the culture of, and the environment here. Like, is it, well, are we welcoming? How's our customer service? Happy people make happy people. Supportive, respectful, and inclusive culture.
I think that culture piece, that, you know,
I mean, I don't want to change anything Michelle just said. Culture and environment, that's kind of it.
okay, so 6:15, I think that we can come up with some of these things that can be wordsmithed. I think this is just gut instinct right now. What is our goal around programming? What do we want from our program? Is this a bad one? This was maybe the bad one to start with, because I think it gets a little more complicated.
Yeah, I think, you know, and this is just going back to the focus groups and some of the things that I heard in the focus groups, you know, people were talking about having things that were, you know, geared toward like, I don't know, right, like adult education or, you know, or adult kind of civic engagement, you know. There was one thing that came up that was interesting. This goes to kind of the community hub piece of things, but also kind of programming. It was in both of the focus groups I did, it came up independently in both of them, and it was talking about the online, like, author talks and things that the library has of having an in-person viewing parties for those, so that people can come here, and then that would allow them to watch the author talk and then have like a
And then have like a moderated
discussion afterward. You know, that was, it's a very specific thing, you know, not a broader category, but that, it was just interesting because that exact same, you know, suggestion came up in the two focus groups that I did, and I thought it was an interesting idea. And, you know,
Place to cut that loneliness and social fragmentation.
Yes. The thing that keeps coming up, well, you go ahead.
No, but that feeds back into that community hub, that being a part of something, we don't have to be home anymore.
right.
And that comes up across age groups, because we talk about it a lot with adults, combating loneliness, building connection, but we also see it with the parents who come in with their kids, where it's not just the kids doing story time, it's the parents talking to each other.
Talking to another adult.
Right. So at the risk of doing a word cloud, like the ones that kept coming up for me were educational, community, connection. I hate the word enrichment, but that's another common one. It's like making people's lives better through the
Yeah.
programming.
I think a running theme with the things you heard about the movies and the seniors talking to us, and it's like they want something meaty and then they want to socialize and talk about it
Right,
after.
yeah, it's not like you hear the music and you just pack up your stuff and go away or have a random high as you're going out to your car. It's sort of like you listen to the music and then there's something after it that people can sort of discuss how they relate.
What was the last word, Pete, that you said, that you're like, I hate to say this?
Enrichment.
Enrichment.
Yeah. It's such an academic word, but it's.
So, oh, and then I just, oh gosh.
Makes me feel like a
Seventh meeting of
tiger.
the day.
Tigers.
So would our broad goal under programming be something like to provide educational, enriching, connection-based, that's not the right thing, programming that meets the needs of all demographics of our community, or something like that? Is that what our goal is in programming?
What's the word you didn't like?
Enrichment.
No, where you said it.
Oh, connection.
Connection, something, I mean, connection's fine, it just, there's.
Engaging?
Yeah, yeah, just something to get at. I'm a regular thesaurus user too, so, you know. But something to get at that piece that is what people want, which is not just going to see a program or something, but the connect is a big part of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, does that sort of fit? And then underneath that goal?
Yeah, I think, I don't know what's the right, you know, we have these, you know, multi-level, you know, goals and objectives and you know, that maybe, you know, we start trying to think of what are our specific objectives, you know, that we want to, you know, aim for, try and achieve in some way, and kind of see how a couple of them might, you know.
Might shape the
might
language?
Shape the language of the goal, you know, like if we come up with, you know, we know the broad categories that we've talked about here. And if we're thinking about, you know, programs, for example, we kind of come up with a few things that are kind of objectives that we can later come up with the specific action items under, but come up with a few objectives, and then we look at them and say, okay, these are things we've identified as objectives related to programs. How can we kind of describe them all in terms of a goal that they're all kind of serving? So it's, maybe it's not figure out the goal first and then go with that, but kind of let it come up from below. I don't know.
I'm fine with reverse engineering. Okay. So now I'm not sure where to go with our test today, if that's the way we're gonna work this backwards. Actually, I do have a good idea, which is we've talked about the community hub being our vision, being interwoven. If we want a short, tidy vision statement that we can think about as we're putting these initiatives in there, what would we want it to be? Does everybody understand like what I mean? So I can use my work, for example. We have a mission statement that kind of looks like GPLs, but it's focused on a different area. Our vision statement is together we make law libraries better. Like it's to the point and hits on like the two things. Connectivity with together, law libraries, that's who we work with. So if we want to incorporate Community Hub and think of a vision statement now, so that can be sitting there as we talk through the language of the goals, what initiatives we want to have within it. What is it?
This is so.
So yeah, I mean,
Like a slogan type language.
like a little slogan,
Right,
just do
right.
it, you know?
Around the community hub
And
idea.
do we like the what do we like? What is the term? We know what we mean when we say community hub, but is that the catchiest thing? Is that the thing that we want to use?
He wrote in on human connection that I highlighted from here, but I don't know what else to say about
But
it.
gathering place is something, you know, that I've heard, you know, like when we had the farmer's market, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We were
maybe-
using that when we were talking to the press out front, I think, farmer's markets here.
Yeah, so it's something like a, a Gilderland's gathering place for, intellectual and civic engagement and, just some other words that we just said that I was gonna incorporate in that.
Human
Does-
connection.
Connections.
Yeah, connection.
Yeah.
Does gathering place make it feel as though we are only talking about this space?
Yeah, no, right, it's,
We've used
That's-
that like
I know it's
for
been,
a
like,
while, so I don't know if we should do something different.
That's true, yeah.
So the two things I wrote down before we started going down this path was heart and center.
Yep, yep.
And it's, heart is usually like one of those. Yeah, I think that fits if we're focused on human connection. I really do like gathering place though.
I didn't even think hub is that bad. You can just stick with like community hub for the rest of the line. But
What's
maybe,
the etymology of hub? Is that weird for me to think about? Like, I kind of want to.
It's the wheel.
It's the middle of the wheel
Yeah.
where all the spokes come out of. So that's the middle where everything, right?
think so.
An entire, it's like that hub is the middle and all the spokes come out and reach out to balance the rest of
But, I
the
mean, we
thing.
could, if we want to use something a little more, like.
I don't know, I
The heart of the, we could use something a little
Yeah,
more.
like our vision is to be the heart of an intellectual.
intellectual is just not a good.
Yeah, it's.
I actually don't know because our mission statement touches on all those pieces of it. So I would actually encourage the vision to be cropped and just be,
They kill the one better.
like, we make.
I don't,
I think. Inspiration,
Because like then the mission is sort of like an expanded on version of the, and in the mission statement, I don't know what it says, but it says like those things like lifelong learning, cultural enrichment, like, and you know it off the top of your head, Michelle?
I literally have the old long-range plan in front of me.
Oh, okay, wait, what does it say?
It is, the mission is to provide equal access to physical and digital materials, programs, and services to our community for lifelong learning, cultural enrichment, and enjoyment.
And we did modify it a little bit, but I think the heart of it's still the same
Yeah, I
thing.
think,
And we're to be a delight, we're supposed to delight
Is
everyone.
there a vision in that?
Delight every patron.
Yes, there is a vision.
Did-
Our vision, which,
Too many words.
no, it's just, the Guilderland Public Library is an innovative, vibrant, and dynamic public library committed to offering unique and essential services to the town of Guilderland and the Capital District. And then we have guiding principles, which are valuing every stakeholder, delighting every patron, providing professional, knowledgeable, and courteous service, presenting wide-ranging services, programs, and resources reflecting the diverse and ever-changing needs of our community. And then the goals.
Okay, that's a lot of words.
But,
We're gonna make this
a lot
less
of good
words.
ideas. Whoever put that together did a lot of
But
work.
what's funny is in the goals, there's no programming.
Mhm.
There's no, not really a lot of collections either.
Huh.
It's been a while since I read it because honestly, I kind of just need it out of my head when I'm thinking about things. So,
Well, that's why I'm looking at it and I'm going, nope, nope.
How about something like Gilderland's Hub for Community Engagement and Connections? I don't know. It's like trying to be short and
Mhm.
I was just gonna say Gilderland's Hub and Heart,
Hey.
period, in a sentence.
Oh, just
know.
a tidy.
It's sort of like, between, the mission statement and the brand statement.
There,
Yeah.
I mean, a vision statement is a brand statement for a nonprofit. Like, that's truly what it is.
Yeah, I know, but a brand is also just really like 3 or 4 words, like
Yeah.
the most, and the image that goes with it, and the vision statement's a little bit beyond that.
Okay, so here's what, oh, go ahead, Mike.
nothing, no, go ahead. You go ahead. House.
Okay, here's what I'm gonna suggest. So that we can really get into the weeds next month about all these pieces. I'm going to type up my notes from here, which include all the points we hit on. I'm just gonna have these 5 areas. We're gonna brainstorm on what we want our vision to be. And then take the other little pieces that are included in the notes, especially if they came from yourself, anything else that pops in, plus other ideas that we have that were not in there. And let's just start a collective, are people comfortable with Google Docs? Since we're a Google organization, we're just gonna start a collective list that has ideas. We're not saying if you put in there makerspace under the space one, that doesn't mean we're getting a makerspace. It's just acknowledging that that might be something we want in there. So next month when we come in, which is really only like 3 weeks away, because this got pushed back, we'll have that starting point to highlight the ones that we want included and start talking about initiatives.
That, if you're talking about the first week of April, that's also break week. I'm not gonna be good that well.
Okay.
I think other people might have that.
Yeah, well, it would have been Easter.
I don't know if everybody else, but I got that.
The
So
6th,
it
April.
would be the 7th.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem if, I mean, it's only a couple of weeks away, but if we want to actually go earlier with March 31st.
Which day of the week is that?
It's Tuesday. I'm just like looking at flipping it 1 week
3
earlier.
weeks from today.
Because I am also not available at all the week after that. That is our work conference that we host. So
That's
it's,
the 31st.
yeah.
Yeah, there are no committee meetings then.
Okay, so next meeting, we're gonna do 31st. How do we get that
I
reserved?
I will book it and
Oh, okay.
copy Amy on it, so
Okay.
she books the room.
So I am going to, on Thursday, this is my training. I'm gonna send out this email.
All right.
Okay, that gives us some homework, which I think is the only way we're gonna make our hour work is if we come in and we are done our homework.
Are you gonna start the document?
Unless somebody else wants to start it, I will start it, but I won't. I have a GM-packed day tomorrow, so it won't let me starting until Thursday.
Okay.
If somebody else wants to take the lead, go for it and just email the group. I did take a couple of pages of notes here, so No, but if, I know, Michelle is my active note taker. So if you have time and you want to start it, you can, but there is no pressure.
I can tomorrow, I will have it done tomorrow.
Okay, if it's not done tomorrow, then I will work on it on Thursday and just let you drop your things in. Thank you so much, guys. We're gonna get this thing done.
We are right on schedule.
Okay.